Hey guys, it's Daniel. Welcome back. When it comes to Layne Staley, one of the tragic aspects of his life, of course, was his struggle with addiction. Without ridiculing or putting him down, Layne Staley's addiction is something which shouldn't be ignored in terms of the story of Alice in Chains and both Layne Staley's own life, because the addiction had a significant influence on both. Layne Staley, of course, was not the only person in his circle who had drug problems. Mark Lanegan and Kurt Cobain are two prominent names which come to mind. But it wasn't only Layne's famous friends who had drug issues. An old friend of Layne's, Ron Holt, also had heroin issues. In an interview with journalist David DeSola, Ron Holt, reflecting on his own heroin struggles, speculated on what he thought may have been going through Layne Staley's head. He also reflects on how, in his opinion, Layne Staley may have actually wanted to create more music, but Layne's addiction was just taking over his life. This is from Alice in Chains, The Untold Story. Quote, "There's something that happens when you're an addict, where it becomes bad and you want to stop. And you do genuinely want to stop, even if you stay realistic about it and you accept it. Before you accept your fate, there are points where you try to stop and say, I'm going to stop, my record label wants me to, whatever. You draw a line in the sand, but you break it. And then you do it again, and you do it repeatedly. You do it so many times that at a certain point in your head you go, I can't even promise myself. What's the use? So you start losing your faith in your ability. And so you hang on. So when you find something that you can do or you can hang on to, you tend to overemphasize it. Shut everything else that you fail at out. Pretty soon, what happens is that you're in this mindset too long that when you finally get clean, like when I did, I found out, wow, I'm not Ron Holt the conqueror or creative guy anymore. I'm this beaten down, frightened person. I think that's what Layne became. I think that he could have, and probably somewhere desired to, create more than he did." End quote. Now, to Ron Holt's point about addicts wanting to fight their addiction, but then sometimes, quote-unquote, accepting their fate, it should be noted that according to Alice in Chains drummer Sean Kinney, Layne Staley once told him that he was going to die from drugs, that there was no escaping it. It's a very sad thing to hear, and I hope that anyone listening to this who may have their own struggles, that you're able to find the courage and the strength to be able to overcome what's in front of you. The following is from Sean Kinney regarding Layne Staley's death. This is from Grunge is Dead. Quote, "It wasn't a mystery. Layne told me straight up, I'm never coming back. I'm not going to quit doing drugs. I'm going to die like this. This is it. So I'm like the codependent girlfriend. No, but I knew that was a fact. It was just horrible. I've lost a lot of friends and put myself in a lot of screwed up situations. The way he looked at me and how he said it, I just knew that he had made his decision. And you can't change people's minds. People buy a record and read a magazine and they think they know you. They come up and give you didn't try to help him, you could have saved him. It's like, we did everything. We were as supportive as anyone could be. If somebody doesn't want it, they don't want it. It's not like he was a bitter guy and there was hatred. He just made his decision. A lot of damage had been done. He seemed like he was good with it. I'm not good with it. I'm not good with it today. I never was then. Probably never will be. I quit answering the phone for 5 or 6 years. I didn't want that phone call. Let it ring and let the machine get it. That still even sticks with me to this day. Slight phone phobia. It's like, uh-oh, bad news. Just hoping that it's never going to happen, knowing the chances are that it's going to be coming in one day. Ironically, it all went down on April 5th, the same day Kurt died 8 years earlier. Just bizarre timing on that. By then, I had started going away from lots of drugs and just started drinking. Like that's any better. I don't crank Alice in Chains albums too much, and I hadn't in a long time for obvious reasons. It's painful, sad, and brings up a lot of stuff. Until we started jamming again with William. It had been long enough. We had dealt with things long enough. For me, it was really therapeutic to go back and go through that. But honestly, I hadn't listened to those records in years. End quote. Now, it's interesting to hear Sean Kinney say that Layne Staley said he was just going to never stop taking drugs, because in an interview with Rolling Stone, which was published in 1996, Layne Staley actually denied having a drug problem. It'd be interesting, to me at least, to hear from Sean Kinney what year Layne Staley said this to him, whether it was before, after, or even during 1996. The article in question was published in February of 1996 and was written by journalist John Widerhorn. The article, entitled Alice in Chains to Hell and Back, explores various aspects of the band's history, as well as what things were like with the band at that point in time in '96. In early 1996, the band had recently released their self-titled third studio album, also known as the Dog Record, released on November 7, 1995. The album deals with heavy subject matter such as depression, death, and drug use. Though of course these are themes which frequently appear in Alice in Chains recordings, the tone of the Dog album is particularly bleak. Furthermore, by early '96, Layne's health had very seriously declined as a result of his drug use. As a matter of fact, the last ever show the band played with Layne Staley took place a few months later on July 3rd of '96. In this Rolling Stone article, however, Layne Staley essentially denies that he has a serious drug problem. Reflecting on this and the Dog Record, John Widerhorn wrote the following, quote, "If Dirt was a diary of the pain and animosity caused by addiction, betrayal, and hypocrisy, Alice in Chains' self-titled record chronicles the bitter after effects of conflict seeking to reassemble the shattered pieces. We let stuff come straight out on this one," says Jerry Cantrell. "It was often depressing, and getting it done felt like pulling hair out. But it was the coolest thing, and I'm glad to have gone through it. I will cherish the memory forever." Layne Staley then adds, "I'll cherish it forever too, just because this one I can remember doing," he says, only half joking. Despite the evidence, Staley won't acknowledge that he still battles with heroin. "If I'm staying busy, and if I'm getting my job done, and I'm doing things I think are great, then I don't have a problem with anything, says Layne Staley. If I live on just a strictly sugar diet, hey, I like it." He laughs weakly and nervously, then continues, "Nobody ever asks Meatloaf, 'What do you eat? Why do you eat so much? Shouldn't you lose some weight?' No, he shouldn't. He's Meatloaf. He writes songs and he has a great time, and none of your business. Maybe he eats meatloaf every night, People have a right to ask questions and dig deep when you're hurting people and things around you," Staley continues. "But when I haven't talked to anybody in years, and every article I see is dope this, junkie that, whiskey this, that ain't my title. Like, hi, I'm Layne, nail-biter, My bad habits aren't my title. My strengths and my talent are my title." Layne Staley's argument might carry more weight if he didn't write about using drugs. 5 songs on Dirt were about heroin, and several tracks on the Dog Record are drug-related. From the song Sludge Factory, for instance, there's the lyric, "Things go well, your eyes dilate, you shake and I'm high." Or from the song Head Creeps, there's the line, "No more time, just one more time." Yet, Layne says he's reluctant to talk about his addiction, not because he's embarrassed, but because he's worried his fans will think he's glorifying drugs. "I wrote about drugs, and I didn't think I was being unsafe or careless by writing about them," Layne says. "Here's how my thinking pattern went. When I tried drugs, they were great, and they worked for me for years, and now they're turning against me, and now I'm walking through hell, and this sucks. I didn't want my fans to think that heroin was cool, but then I've had fans come up to me and give me the thumbs up, telling me they're high. That's exactly what I didn't want to happen." Although Layne Staley won't go into any details about his past or present drug use, he admits to having an addictive personality. "When I'm not doing drugs, I eat," he says, "and I binge and I gain 20 pounds, and I work out, and when I start working out, I go crazy on it. I can't do anything in small doses. If I sat there and said, I'm 90 days sober and easy does it, stay the course, I'd be full of it, because I'm not 90 days sober. But I'm not in the bathroom getting high either. But 2 years ago, I would have been. It's not something I think about. It's not something I wake up and have to go find," says Layne Staley. End quote. Now, tragically, of course, despite all that being said, Layne Staley's last show with the band would take place in '96 as a result of his increasing addiction to drugs. The show took place on July 3rd of '96 in Kansas City when the band opened that day for Kiss. Reflecting on Layne Staley's final show, the staff at Far Out magazine once wrote the following, quote, "Alice in Chains frontman Layne Staley is one of the tragic figures of rock and roll, largely because he follows such a heavily mapped out route. Artistry, fame, success, drugs, loss of control, and ultimately, death. The singer passed away in 2002 after a lengthy battle with addiction, but his final appearance on stage with Alice in Chains would come years beforehand. The band had been struggling to work with Layne Staley and his copious heroin addiction in the years prior to their '85 self-titled album. His addiction had made regular band activities an impossibility. But one opportunity they were afforded was to cut an MTV Unplugged album in the spring of '96, and the group did not disappoint. They also grabbed the opportunity to open for one of America's most beloved and highest-earning rock acts of all time, Kiss, and their hyped-up reunion tour. Now, Scott Weiland and his own drug use had forced the original opening band Stone Temple Pilots out of the picture. Alice in Chains picked up the baton. Taking to the stage ahead of Kiss's reunion was a daunting prospect, and we imagine being faced with 40,000 die-hard Kiss fans, likely all in makeup, is about as tough as it gets. But Staley and the band were more than a match for them. The band opened their part of the tour on June 28th of '96 in Detroit, and after stops at Louisville and St. Louis, they concluded their tour at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City on July 3rd. The band's 10-song set would be the last one they delivered in their iconic lineup. Luckily, some legend kept his camcorder on the band during their entire 47-minute set. It was a starring performance, but did capture one noticeable thing. Layne Staley was far from peak physical condition. When the singer steps up to close out the performance with Man in the Box, his fragility and clear weakness make for an extra poignancy. A short while after the show, Layne Staley suffered a severe overdose and was hospitalized. End quote. Reflecting on both the Kiss tour and Unplugged, drummer Sean Kinney once said the following. This is from Grunge is Dead. Quote, "Me and Jerry especially wanted to do the Kiss tour. I was in the Kiss Army and they were bringing back the original lineup. Layne kept saying, I don't want to do it, so we gave up on it. We didn't hear about it for a while. They must have asked again and he said, I'll do it. Those ended up being the last shows we played in public. They went great. They were fun. It was nice being out there. It was only 5 or 6 shows, and by the end of the shows, the last one, it was cops, ambulance, and get on the plane, hide the drugs. The same stuff was going on. It became more apparent that unless things seriously change, we can't go out and play to our potential at this level. We can't even get through a week and a half without drama and scary stuff going on. That's about right when I started mentally preparing like, it's done. Same thing with MTV Unplugged. They kept asking if we'd do it. Up to the moment, it was just a nail-biter. Barely any rehearsing at all. Guys not showing up, the same stuff. Rolled out there and everything thankfully worked. Right then is when I knew, okay, if we never do anything again, I'm good with this. I'd rather leave on a high point instead of throwing drug paraphernalia into a garbage can in an airport, hoping to not get arrested while I jump on a plane. That's when I started to distance myself from it and just preparing for the worst, which it eventually happened.